congratulations on becoming a fellow of IE.
Thank you.
You're in the first group of fellows of a nationwide organisation. And were you surprised that out of all of the designers in the country, that you were chosen?
Well, I was delighted to be asked, mainly because on paper I'm not actually an interior designer. I'm an experiential designer, architect turned experiential designer. But I do think that the concept of me being a part of the IE group is that it embraces other disciplines, clearly.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I always think I'm operating slightly outside of the kind of defined field of interior design. So for that, I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, so it's a great honour for us, and for us here at Ravensbourne to have you, I suppose, tell us a little bit about what you have been doing, and also what inspires you. And that presentation really touched on a lot of different things, various cultures, different places. It's sort of set there so the place of the designer is not simply being someone who works within their own environment, but looks to, so I suppose, the world. How's that been for you?
Yeah, well, I think when Drew introduced, my piece, he'd done his research and he talked about us being storytellers, and that's the essence of what we do. And understanding, and I go back to my Venn diagram, which is very convenient, and as it says on the slide, it took 10 years to draw, and it's about space and architecture, place. It's about stories that need to be told, which is a cultural thing. If we're working in Malta at the moment, we're working in the Middle East, we worked in Japan, and we tell stories in a very different way. They're culturally based. And then communication media is the type of media we use, which can shift from culture to culture as well. So this kind of mashup of architecture, story, and the communication of the stories is quite complex. But what I love it. I love what I do. I can't get up in the morning and start work quick enough, is because we are enhancing the quality of people's lives to make them think about themselves, to make them think about their material culture. It may be about science, technology, sport, ecology, boats. I just don't know what it's going to be next.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I'm so happy with what I do.
But the interesting thing in particular about you is this sense of collaboration.
Yeah.
And you don't simply work with architects or simply work with other designers. No. You work across a whole range of people in digital media and so on.
Yeah.
And here at Ravensbourne, that
resonates.
The heart of what we do.
Yeah.
And what do you think the future of that is? Do you think there's going to be people will sort of work for 10 years in one thing and move over to something else?
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. And I think because our future is in the hands of our children and our students, and I just think they embrace the technologies so easily now, and that as far as they're concerned, everything's up for grabs. They can use what they like. So I think that the concept of students crossing the line at university is really accelerating. And I just think those boundaries and those corridors and the labels on the doors are all going to be broken down, and I don't think that bothers the students of tomorrow, actually, or even the students of today. It doesn't bother them that they're not under a typology or a heading or a discipline or a domain. They're going to cross the line whether you like it or not. And ultimately, I think it's going to reinvigorate and reinvent the concept of what a design school is about, is that people will build their own programs, actually.
Yes.
I think you'll give them a menu of programs and they'll piece them together in their own way. There'll be hybrids.
And do you think the rest of the industry is going to be accepting of that kind of new hybrid designer?
Well, I think it's very interesting what's going to drive it, if the industry drives academia or whether academia drives industry. And sometimes it could be the latter, that you could, because industry probably is a bigger juggernaut to turn.
True.
But it's market-led, it's the marketplace leads it. But I'm finding more and more that, we work in the experiential domain. And what is experiential media? And some people think experiential media is a website, an interactive website. Well, I don't. I think it's about interactive space. I think it's about people in real time, real space, together, live and bringing the live experience, bringing it alive in a really exciting way. So what I'm excited about in the way we use media is I want to get people actually out of their bedrooms and away from their laptops. I want to get them into space, communicating and finding out things in real time and real space.
This is really interesting. So how did you start? Because you started at the AA, I think.
Yeah.
Trained as an architect.
Yeah.
How did you move from doing architecture into making experiential environments that sort of we learn from? And you're really noted for that, whether it be the Dome or a series of major museum projects.
Yeah.
How did you move from one thing to another?
Yeah, I think the big switch for me was when I did architecture, and it wasn't a formal training. It was at the AA, which was pretty informal. And I was working with I was studying with architects that were making buildings walk. Ron Heron was making buildings walk. Peter Cook was covering them in media. They were way ahead of their time, the Archigram group. So I was kind of tuned up for it, and just by circumstance, by chance, I started working at the BBC. And I'll never forget, I walked into the BBC and the group I was in were working on Mike Leigh's Abigail's Party, which is a seminal piece of television. And then after 10 years I was working in light entertainment, I was working in drama, I was working in film, I was going on location, and I started to get this thing called a script. Now the interesting thing is, a script is a story that unfolds. It has direction. People tell you what they want to happen. It has characters, and my job as a designer was to design for characters, design for the script, design for the directions of the director. So suddenly you have to bring to life the written word. Now the big difference between a script and a brief is that it has a sense of vitality. It has an emotion attached to it. Briefs don't have that. Briefs are just prosaic pieces of information. It's a program of spaces. Yeah. It's an adjacency of spaces, typically what architects or interior designers would get. So I was very lucky. I was getting this kind of written document called a script. And I then realised that how important the written word is, and how important as a production designer. And I worked in theatre as well, which is different from television and film, because you have 500 sets of lenses. A lens is a single thing in film or television, but in the theatre it's 500 lenses. It's a slightly different way of working. But I think it was the written word that excited me, and as a designer, how I interpreted the written word, storytelling. And I think there's so much to learn from that.
There's a very different way of looking at how you operate as a designer, or I suppose as a facilitator of people's visions, their dreams.
Yeah. Well, the other option is I might get, sometimes I get a straight brief, like recently the Pompeian Herculaneum at the British Museum. That was a fairly straight brief as opposed to a script, But I guess that, I just ran away with it, and I thought, well, my job is to bring the script to life, bring the brief, to life in almost a scripted way. So if you like, I'm kind of running with, when I get a brief, I turn it into a script.
That's what you mean. And one of the other things is that you've known Ravensbourne students now for quite a few years. You've done a lot with supporting the development of courses and so on.
Yeah.
And what do you think the future might hold for them? Where might they look for inspiration, apart from yourself, of course?
Well, I as I said earlier, I think it's just, because it's very interesting. I have a son who's he's 13, and it's made me realise is that for the first time in the history of education, and he's at a good school, the kids know more than the teachers. They know more about digital media than the teachers do. Now, that's pretty true. I mean, if you work into tertiary education, it's not quite true, because you've got a lot of very savvy people here. But at secondary education, it's very confusing for the kids, because, they're cutting movies, they're ripping stuff. They're laying down, my son lays down music over images that he rips from BBC or whatever, and I go in and I see this incredible bit of movie making, way beyond anything I'm capable of. So I think that the time has come for them to be much more kind of, agile. They're much more agile, and I think art school, design schools have to watch this, because the kids coming through now from secondary education are getting even more competent year on year on year, and it's how my question back to you is, how are you going to adapt and be able to support this and provide that kind of extra layer of knowledge and support?
I think in many ways, having you visit and work with the students and introduce them to possibilities and being facilitators in our own right, I think that's sort of the response that we think is beginning to work quite effectively. And certainly the graduates here are very fleet of foot. I mean, they master a range of techniques. But I think what's really interesting is this notion of transforming the brief into a script, into some kind of a story, something which you can present to others. I think that's something which we should start looking at as something we offer to students, a different way of looking at how you produce work. And I think that's very distinctive. That's one of the most distinctive things that we've had in any of our conversations about where the future lies. It's that ability to think of things as stories, a narrative not simply about a beginning and an end, but part of a dialogue or a conversation.
You see, I think you might find that in your course, in this kind of 3D domain, that you may start using scriptwriters. You may start actually, using people that are very versatile and understand the written word, understand storytelling, narrative construction, and you might think, well, what's the point? What's the relevance? But I think the sort of work we're doing demonstrates the value of students that can understand how to use communication media to tell stories in interior spaces. Interior spaces have another dimension, and that dimension is in a domain apparently of other disciplines, but I think you're going to be able to draw those in. So exciting times.
Well, Professor Peter Higgins, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Leighton. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.